Well, hello, folks. Welcome to Never on the Back Foot. So, in tonight's session, we'll be breaking down the very thrilling second test between Australia and India. I know the live was not supposed to happen today, but the test match itself, got over in 3 days. So, you see Neeraj also joining us. Neeraj, to the uninitiated, is also a passionate cricket fan. He supports Australia, but I hope in this stream he has some sympathy for the Indian fans joining in as well.
Right.
And yeah, folks, for everyone joining us, please do share your comments in the live chat. We will make sure to address them through the course of our discussion. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just say hi, Neeraj. Welcome back to Never on the Back Foot. This is your massive debut on YouTube, so I'm really happy to have you here. First things
Yeah, yeah,
first, how
yeah.
are you doing today? Yeah.
I'm doing fine today. It's been a wonderful day. It's been a wonderful week. So far, so good. Results aside, personally speaking, I've had a pretty good run lately. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be back on Never on the Back Foot. We've had two episodes previously, so it feels like I'm coming back home in a way. So yeah, I'm happy today. I'm ready to share my insights today.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to say, Neeraj. I mean, coming back home and everything. But again, just about your expectations, right, heading into the match, because the first test, of course, didn't go according to the Aussie way. Indian fans were so happy. You could see, I think, I think, premature celebrations in like all across social media. So, yeah, what were your expectations heading into this test with the context of that first test match outcome?
My expectations, honestly, so after the first test match, I was a little bit disappointed, but I wasn't hitting the panic button just yet because, I knew going into this test match, a lot of things will have to be in a prototype series for Australia because this is their transitional period. All their batters are hitting their 30s. The bowling attack is also kind of getting old, so they're like in their twilight of their, you know, ex- in certain. Into expectations and everything in between. So we're now that David Warner's gone, I was a little bit skeptical if Australia can get their feet under and get going. Perth was the wake up call we needed to say to ourselves, that, there are places where you have to do better, and this is where you have to improve. And India were a lot more, comprehensive compared to we were. So going into this test match, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I didn't expect us to win this well, but I knew that something had to give, and eventually it was us who delivered the blow. So I'm happy in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, historically as well, right? When you look at Australia's the performances in pink ball test matches, it is just next level. And even before the match, there was a lot of discourse on how the pink ball is very different from, the red ball players, giving their 2 cents and everything. So, Neeraj, again, what did you make of, all of that coming in? Like, are you someone who, is that cricket nerd sort of fan who reads up a lot of the, pink ball, the
Right.
lacquer, the the swing seam and everything?
I'd like to think I am. So in a traditional cricket ball, at least, so the ball is a little bit like this, right? So one sec. So usually in a cricket ball, so the seam is a little bit pronounced, whereas in a pink ball, the seam instead of being white is black in color. So what that usually means is that the ball has a lot of tendency to associate with pace bowlers. So when I mention pace bowlers, the first thing that comes to my mind is you know the India Bangladesh pink ball test match that happened a while back. Um, right. So in that test match, I remember in the second innings, India basically had a bowling attack of Umesh Yadav and Ishan Sharma. This was like 2019, so like 6 years back, at least by now. So coming into this, India, so their expertise with pink ball test matches at least, was basically the last test match they had in Bengaluru, which was against Sri Lanka. So they were basically a little bit inexperienced going into this. Australia, on the other hand, their last time pink ball test match was in Adelaide against West Indies. I think it was the 2023-24 series. So basically, coming to the pink ball itself, it's a little bit different compared to the red ball in the sense that it assists the paces a lot more, and it's also being played under floodlights where the ball has a tendency to react a little bit more violently compared to the red ball when it comes to seam movement. And when you add that with a little bit of pace, it tends to move the ball across. and generating the seven stump line. And that is what kind of affected the Indian batters a lot more. And Australia knew have a lot of expertise when it comes to pink ball test. They've been at it since 2015-16. So I feel like they knew what to do. And yeah, so that's kind of how it helped them play well as well. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think Australia felt, much better prepared to, handle and adapt themselves to the pink ball scenario than the Indian team. But again, just looking at the match itself, Neeraj, what were your thoughts on the changes enforced by the teams, right? I mean, India had a fair few obvious ones. We had Rohit Sharma coming in, Shubman Gill and Ashwin as well. Australia also, I think it was a forced change for them, but clearly turned out to be better for them. So your thoughts on these changes?
So personally feeling, I feel like the changes. So India had to change quite a few players. So they had to leave out the likes of Devdutt Padikkal and Dhruv Jurel for Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill, obviously, and they also had to let go of Jasprit. No, I'm sorry. No, it was
Washington Sundar, yeah.
Washington. Yeah, I'm sorry. So Washington Sundar and Ravichandran Ashwin. So there was a little bit of change in that sense. Australia, they had to unfortunately let go of Josh Hazelwood. When I read that change, it was a bit scary because Hazelwood is a metronomical bowler. He when he bowls at a line, he bowls keeps bowling at that line over and over and over, and losing that kind of a bowler. And he was also one of the standout performers in Perth as well. So losing him was a scary situation, but we did have Scott Boland come in. So we had the Swingo Boland coming in the exchange of metronomical efforts of Hazelwood. So it was a compromise that I was willing to live with. So yeah, India's changes were more or less because they had a more experienced lineup coming in. Australia's changes were more because of the fact that they had an injury. So that's my rough thoughts on what the teams had to do.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think through the course of our discussion, let's, deeply look at it as well, because a lot of, I think, Indian fans were upset with the fact that, why did you go in with, Ravi Ashwin when Washington was doing his job? But again, I think the team management felt, Ashwin would have probably more to offer on a pitch like this with the pink ball. But again, we will talk about it. So let's talk about the toss aspect. Again, India won the toss, chose to bat first. So, Neeraj, do you think that was a wise choice to make, and something that even probably Australia would have done, considering most of the teams that win the toss do opt to bat first?
Adelaide, historically speaking, has been a very batting friendly wicket. If you stop and think about it. So, if I remember very correctly, David Warner made a 335 on this very wicket in 2019. So, against Pakistan, but still, it was a very commendable score. So, you see how this wicket has been very batting friendly in the years gone by. So, batting first was ideally the first choice. I couldn't really complain. We knew that the batting of India was to be tested in these conditions, but yeah, it was subpar. But still, they knew that they can outbat Australia in this wicket, and they went for it. Unfortunately for them, things did not go according to plan, but it was a pretty courageous shot and a sign of intent, if you will.
Yeah, because just looking at India's first innings, it has kind of been the trend in this series, right? Again, did not have the most ideal of that first innings, getting all out for what, 180. So, what did you make of India's batting performance? I mean, Kale and Shubman did get those starts; they were unable to convert. We had skipper Rohit Sharma, come down in the middle order because he trusted, KL to do the opening job. The batting just didn't seem, to come together well, right? So again, just looking at the Indian batting effort, what were your observations?
I feel like this Indian batting effort, the first ball, I think, set the story of it all. You had a charging Stark, and he was coming inward, and it was like not mistaken, a 3-degree movement on that scene, and struck the pad of Jaiswal. And in a similar fashion, you had a few years back in Gabba, Rory Burns got out the first ball in a similar fashion. Instead of hitting his bat, it went to his stumps, but still you see that set the stone for the how the innings would go. And KL Rahul obviously had runs to show in Perth, but there were issues with his batting since the a very long time. It's been a very erratic kind of form. So putting him up the order against a pink ball, against that pace attack, it was a lot of questions. And and then you had Shubman and KL who did get starts and did get a few checks here and there, but it did not exactly convert into a proper innings. And this is where I think something that, if I'm not mistaken, Pujara told on the comms or on an interview, I forgot, but he told that the Indian batters play too many shots nowadays. And I think that's very expressive of the way cricket is also going with the advent of baseball. This very aggressive intent from the first ball kind of ideology. It's very strong that it's affecting teams who are naturally out batters to go out and play this aggressive game, which is not natural to them. For someone like KL Rahul or Shubman Gill, they have the tendency to play a long innings. They tend to take the time and bat and bat and bat. They should have done that, but they failed to capitalize on it, and then won too many shots and giving away too many fine chances, and some of them were capitalized by Australia, and that led to a 180 all out. So yeah, that was my thoughts.
Yeah, and Neeraj, again, just picking your brains a little bit on this opening combo we're looking at of KL and Shubman, Rohit Sharma coming in that middle order. I mean, were you convinced with it? Because I know KL Rahul did a decent job in that first test, and a lot of us, I think, including me, were backing him to continue with that opening slot for the second test as well. But considering Rohit Sharma was coming back, which side of the fence were you sitting on? Did you want Rohit to do the opening, or were you convinced with KL doing his job?
I feel like Rohit slotting himself in the middle order was a sign of cowardice, and this might come out as a little bit harsh. It might come out as a little bit harsh, but I think it's a sign of cowardice because when you're the captain of the team, you need to go out there and make an intent, right? Because you need to set the tone for your team moving forward. And when you come in and say that, we will put our captain in the middle order and send a man who's been under very erratic form as our opener and a little kid as our opener as well. It kind of sets the tone for what India wants to show after the inclusion of Rohit Sharma after the second test when your captain himself is getting the order. It's not to give the upper ones an opportunity. It's just to shield himself because, as you know, the pink ball gets older and older with the days passing. Just to get a softer ball across and to score runs off of that. That was the idea. But when your starting base itself is a bit weak or fragile in this case, it tends to get problematic to a point where you're just a little concerned as to whether he'll make the runs or not, and that I feel like should be addressed by the management. They should let Rohit open. It's not to say that KL is a bad opener. KL is a versatile player, by the way. He can open, he can bat at 5 or 6. He's capable in that sense. But when you have him go open when he's at his lowest, that kind of makes things a little bit upsetting. So I feel like Rohit should have opened in this test. If he opened in this test, I feel like there would have been a different story because Chasewal would have had an experienced person on the other side of it. Experienced opener, most notably enough. So that's my take on this whole Rohit Sharma going down the order debacle. So yeah.
No, fair enough. And thank you for sharing that so openly, Neeraj, because a lot of Indian fans, have been just criticizing Rohit for, I mean, exactly the same thing of, not being like, captain enough and actually open the innings. And why did KL have to do it? But Akshat here asks a very pertinent question that says, will India continue with the same batting order in Gaba or will there be a change? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. I feel like there will be a change. I feel like if things go right, Rohit will be opening. But honestly speaking, I feel like the management will stick with the same batting order in with reasons of continuity because you have two players who've played with the same partner for two test match consecutively. That's 4 innings across 4 innings, so they know each other a little bit more now. So now, if you put the spanner in the works, all of a sudden things will go wrong. And I know I've said that Rohit Sharma has to open, but maybe somewhere along the lines rather than just pushing it along.
Yeah, and I think only time will tell what the batting order going to be like. But again, Neeraj, I mean, I did get your thoughts on India's batting effort in that first inning. But let's talk about Australia, right? I mean, they were supreme with the ball, especially Stark. Man picked a six for his best figures. He looked at his attacking best. It was so menacing. So talk us about that bowling effort with even Pat Cummins and Scott Boland just coming all very good together. Nathan Lyon being barely used. Good day in the office for them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for Australia's pace battery, they've executed their plans. As I said, they had a repertoire of data to go back through to see where things work, where things don't work, and that kind of helped them understand where the ball would actually spin, not spin, but like zip off the pitch, if you will. So in that sense, they have had a good outing. Mitchell Stark, the man he is, he managed to pick six. It's his best, figures in Test match cricket. So in that sense, he's done a good job. I'm loving it in a way because 6 for 48. That first ball to Jaiswal, I think, kind of helped them alleviate the blockage in his mind because in the previous innings that both Jaiswal and Stark faced each other, the infamous "you're too slow" comment. you know, and he also had a very bad day in the third innings as well. With 1 for 1 in 11 in Perth. So coming into this Test match, there were a lot of questions if he was, at least not fit, but like at least capable enough to carry the attack forward. Yeah, so in that sense, I think he's done well, and he had a solid contributing spears with him. Pat Cummins he peppered it short, and sometimes he hit it, sometimes he didn't. But and you have also had Poland, obviously. Poland's a man who nips it back into the right-handers, and India had quite a few right-handers in the top order. If you look closely, you had Rahul, Kohli, and Rohit, obviously, um, and a few others along the line as well. Ravichandran Ashwin. So that lineup was very heavy on right-handers. So and Shubman Gill, how did I miss Shubman Gill? So you see how many right-handers were there, and picking Boland was a contributory choice to this. So yeah, I'm happy that Australia had something to show. Maybe Nathan Lyon, but then again, the ball was moving rather than spinning. So in that sense, I think it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a very memorable bowling performance because, again, when you just look at the batting, right, Australia's first innings, I mean, it was a stellar show, right? I mean, Khwaja was dismissed early on, but you still had the likes of McSweeney and Marnus, just batting it out there on day one. And I had conversations with a lot of Indian fans who believed, that Australia would probably be like, half the team would be back in the shed. But clearly that wasn't the case. They were making the Indian bowlers, put in those hard yards and just they were just grinding it out there. Again, just looking at it from two perspectives, did you see concerns with that Indian bowling on that particular day, and just Australia showing that resilience and grit to bat longer?
Let me answer this question with a little anecdote. During the Perth test, I remember I was in my hostel somewhere in Koramangala. I was headed to, I think it was Whitefield, so to watch a show with a friend of mine. So on my way from Koramangala to Whitefield, Australia lost 5 wickets. I think that kind of set the tone for Perth. And also the Bumrah factor, that man is bowling like the devil himself. So it was a big, large concern when coming to Adelaide. I was also one of the skeptical people. I was like, either one of them is going to get out by at least day one. Kawaja did get out, but then McSweeney and Labuschagne, they had a few lives coming their way, courtesy of Siraj and Rana. They were bowling a bit too wayward and gave them too much width, essentially. So, since there was a lot more width to play, so that kind of gave them confidence to keep batting. And that innings kind of evolved from there, and everyone else kind of took the lead from there onwards. I mean, personally speaking, I'm a little bit disappointed that Steve Smith didn't get his hands in, but then he's been struggling throughout the series, so I don't really have a lot to complain about. Maybe he'll find his way moving forward, but right now, Australia's batting order is of two tracks. One is working, the other one isn't. but only time will tell if they can actually keep it in hand.
Yeah, and again, let's talk about Magnus Labuschagn's knock, right? I mean, you could see him kind of just grind it out there, take his time, screaming no run, just irritating the Indian bowlers and the fielders around. Played a stellar knock of 64. I think it definitely had the potential to be 100, with the way he was going, but that just loss of concentration you could see, he just gave away his wicket quite literally. But Neeraj, how happy were you to see Madness, just get back into his shape? Because we remember the Madness of 2022, doing his thing
Yeah.
and a few lean performances in between. And now we see him come back to his own, right? Great signs for Australia.
It is because Australia for since like 2019 they've had like two pillars, Mars and Steve Smith. So these two pillars, whenever they rarely did well, Australia had a tendency to lose, and one of the reasons why Australia lost that series in 2020-21 is because either one of them failed or the other one kept going. So that was one of the reasons why they lost. And coming to this series, I knew that both of them would have the skeletons in the closet, if you will. So I was a bit skeptical about Manas scoring runs. I knew he was getting a start, but I didn't know if he could like take it from there. But I'm happy that I was proved wrong. And there's this old Indian adage meme of I remember seeing this in 2020. So it's a Hindi meme. It goes a bit like this: Noran Noran Bolke Soran Banadia, which roughly translates to he kept saying Noran, but he eventually made 100 runs. It wasn't 100; it was a well-made 64. But I think this is the start, or at least a base for the machine to build up on. So I'm happy with the way it did.
Yeah, certainly. And I think earlier in our conversation too, you briefly touched on Steve Smith as well, right? About how he's not been in the best of the form. And I think the Indian bowlers too have been, trying that whole leg side theory and just getting him out. And Steve Smith is literally just playing out to that. His torrent run has been concerning for some time. I think Star Sports was doing this whole segment of, Fab Four and how Virat and Steve Smith have just fallen behind the pack when you look at, say, the likes of, Kane Williamson and Joe Root doing well. So, Neeraj, again, what have your observations been of Steve Smith? Have the bowlers been able to read him well? Is he past his prime, or are we just jumping the gun here?
I feel like we're jumping the gun here a little bit because I feel like Steve Smith has a lot more to give than he can show. Um, his batting style is unconventional. I mean, his stance itself is a little bit more unconventional compared to, yeah, he goes all, stiff hands like this. So that stance in itself is something that has helped him because he was a very reflexes player. I mean, he's had a history of playing tennis as a young kid, and he's a very avid tennis fan as well. Whenever the Australian Open is there, you see Steve Smith somewhere in the audience. If they don't let him inside, he'll probably sit on the roof as well. That's another story. But yeah, you see that he's a very avid tennis fan. In tennis, reflexes play a lot of roles, and some of his shots, if you notice very closely, he keeps using the tennis equivalent of the top hand. So he plays it. I am a left-hander by nature, so I don't know how this will appear on camera. But basically, he tends to move. He has this one whip down shot, right? That's basically like a tennis whip down, essentially. So yeah, so in that sense, Steve Smith, he's been a very reflexes-oriented player, but in the recent past, I'd say ever since 2021 Ashes, he's been very weak with that reflexes of his, and it's a sign of age showing as well. Now is the time for Steve Smith to adapt. Now there's a moment in every player's career where they have to either adapt or take a call. Now's that moment for Steve Smith. So I feel like he's got a lot to give, but it's only a matter of him choosing to give or to call the time.
Yeah, and I hope he doesn't call time because Steve Smith definitely has a lot to offer. Even as an Indian fan, he's one batter you thoroughly just enjoy watching because of how orthodox he is, right? Unconventional, and it's such an important cog of that fan four. Anyways, not me obsessing over Steve Smith. Let's talk about the biggest talking point, perhaps. I think the match-defining knock, that was of Travis Head. I mean, man scored a 140. Neeraj, break down that knock for us and the significance, right? I think a lot of Indian fans at this point will just leave the stream because they hate Travis Head for everything he's caused to India. But then it's impossible
Right.
to not admire the man that he is, right?
Right. So I think we have to compare Travis Head with the role that Aaron Gilchrist played in the 2000s with the Australian team. Yeah, because I remember, I think it was in an episode by Saurav Ganguly. So I remember him going when we took 5 wickets. It wasn't a moment of celebration because he knew Aaron Gilchrist was coming in. That's the kind of player Travis Head has morphed into. Ever since the 21 Ashes, he's been on a purple patch, if you will, in tests. But in recent years, at least, it's been a little bit mellow because he's averaging 36. But seemingly enough, he has something against India, and very specifically enough, India when Rohit Sharma's around. Because you notice very closely. So in the infamous World Cup final of 2019 November, he scored 100 against India. And then when you get to the semi-final against India in Saint Lucia, he scores a 74 out of nowhere. And if I'm not wrong, 74, something along those lines. They basically scored well against India. And then coming into this test against India, when Rohit Sharma's around, he scores runs as if there's nothing happening. And then even in Perth, I remember for second innings, he didn't do a lot good. He got bowled out by Harshit Rana, which was his first wicket in test, by the way. Kudos to him. Coming into the fourth innings, he was battling like anything, and turns out it was Rohit Sharma who was around. So therefore, he started batting. So we need to start a study on this correlation. But Travis said, "I'm happy that he's doing well." He is he's like the holding glue for this side because he's in the he's in the crucial position of the middle order where he's the connecting rod between the top order and the lower order. So having him perform means that a lot more batters in the top order have confidence and the lower order gets a base to add more runs to. So yeah, and I'm happy with his performance in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those knocks. I'm like, Travis had just played against any other team, I would appreciate it more. But then, absolutely taking nothing away from what an amazing knock that was. I
True.
think let's just take a few quick comments here. Anshul goes on to ask us, with just a short turnaround between Adelaide and Brisbane, do you reckon if there'd be any changes in the Indian bowling lineup? I think just adding on to this, just looking at the way the Indian bowling lineup did kind of, not have the best of the outings in Adelaide. Neeraj, do you think there is the possibility of blooding in someone like an Akash Deep, SOS panic call to Shami, who by the way did well in Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy today? But any
Yeah.
changes you reckon?
I feel like there might be a change or two. Especially, I don't think they'll bring in Shami that quickly because he's currently playing a white ball tournament. Syed Mushtaq Ali, he scored 30 something and took 2 wickets. Bengal's in the quarterfinals, and I'm pretty sure the Bengal board wouldn't let him go that easily. Um, I think Akashdeep can come in for someone like a Rana because Rana, while he bowls quick, is a bit too raw for this current stage, and he's more adapted to a white ball cricket format. So he'll do well there, but I don't feel like he's doing all that good in red ball as of now, at least. So maybe giving him a breather, giving him another home series, maybe until further notice. Maybe that could help. Because the bowling lineup, if you see right now, it's very much hinged on Bumrah and the Bumrah factor. So if you put so much workload on a man who has already got a very unauthorized action, there is a problem. And as Anshul pointed out in an earlier comment, Bumrah pulled his groin. So maybe rest him in the Gabba with the view of Shami accompanying him from Melbourne. There is a possibility. I can see him playing through the Boxing Day, but then again, as I said, Bengal isn't going to let go of their star player that quickly. So, as predicted earlier, I feel like Akashdeep could come in because coming into this Test match, I remember seeing a tweet about this. Someone in the cricketing fraternity on Twitter was very excited about seeing Akashdeep show up, but then that never happened. So that's a slightly disappointing sign because he has a tendency to do well against left-handers, and Australia has Kawaja, they have Head, and they have Stark, who is a very capable tail-ender batter, and so you see all these. Yeah, he does awfully well, and I remember this Perth innings of his, where he just held the line against India. So to miss Akashdeep against left-handers, I think it was a missed call from India, but fine. They had a chance, and They decided to stick with what they know. Coming to GABA, maybe they won't change a lot of things. They'll continue, but I feel like for GABA, at least they should change their spinning attack. I feel like Ashwin currently, because he's been given an old ball. If you notice very closely, he's been given the old ball to bowl. In the 2020 series, where he had a lot more success, he was given a new ball to bowl with. I remember, I think it was in Adelaide. So he bowled against Steve Smith, and he got his wicket like it was nothing. And historically speaking, Steve Smith and Ravi Ashwin, they have a battle against each other. But the whole point is that maybe giving the chance to Washington Sundar, who's doing well currently, could be an option. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and hoping even Jadeja can somewhere, feature in the series as well. I think he also has something to offer. But again, time will tell how that goes. Let's also take Ujjwal's comment that says, I don't think the Aussies are going to prepare really spicy tracks anymore. They want to negate Bumrah's impact as much as possible. Neeraj, do you agree with this, that Australia might kind of deploy this strategy?
I feel like they might consider it because if you stop and think about it, Perth, Optus Stadium, they are no longer playing in WACA, unfortunately, has been a very, pace oriented pitch and it's a drop in pitch as well. So, like, they could choose what kind of wicket, they want. If they want a say, flat wicket, they can go for a flat wicket. And it was flat as well. After the first innings, when the grass on the pitch seemingly faded between day two and day three, the pitch started to become a little bit more weaker for bowling. So, and there was not a lot to offer from the seam as well. So, in order to make the series a little bit more interesting, they'd probably avoid making a lot more spicy tracks because if they did, then it will raise a lot of questions in the cricketing fraternity as well. And beyond that, even the players will struggle. I mean, if you have a green pitch, you should the last person you want to face is a Bumrah, and with his unorthodox action, with his sleight of hand, you don't want to face a man like that on a wicket like that. So I think they will try to keep the wickets as equally flat as possible. So yeah, so that's that.
And Neeraj, again, quickly, just probably going a little off topic here about how the pitches are itself, curated and prepared for each of the test matches. We obviously see the home curators, do their magic, probably in consultations with, the home team and all of that. Somewhere down the line, probably, do you see the possibility of, say, neutral pitch curators coming into play so it's a more evenly balanced out thing? Or do you still believe, matlab, let the home curators do their job, let teams have that home advantage, and test cricket is probably better that way?
I feel like we should implement them at least in some measure because if Cricket Australia prepares a drop-in pitch that's more suited to Australian powers, then BCCI in return can prepare a Chennai wicket that's a Bunsen burner essentially. So as a comparison point, and they actually did manage to do that for the semi-finals and finals of the World Cup as well. So you see, when cricketing boards get involved in pitch making, it kind of raises the question if there is a lot of honesty involved as well. Because if you gear it for the home conditions and for the home team, is that really fair? So maybe somewhere along the line, just like how we have match officials and match umpires, maybe we can try having a look at pitch curators. Someone from an independent board in ICC. So maybe they could have a look at the wicket if it's sporting enough. If it's not sporting enough, maybe offering a demerit point because if you see very closely, and it's a cricketing narrative. So when you see very closely, whenever a subcontinent team has a Bunsen burner wicket, and Sri Lanka has been receiving a lot of flack for it, they keep complaining that it's an unsporting wicket, and it's too much cracks in the wickets, therefore it's unplayable. It's a sandpit, and multiple critics like that. But when you go to a SENA country, South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia, when you come here, you see a Wakatas, fresh wicket, green and lush, and wickets, 19 wickets falling on one day. That's the headline you get to see often. So it's kind of like unfair in that sense, the home team gets to dictate what the wicket will look like. I mean, they are well within their rights to make the wicket the way they seem fit. But when you gear it specifically for the home conditions and for the home players, you're also allowing the risk of giving away that advantage to the away team as well, because now the away team knows how to plan and what to plan for. So honestly speaking, we need a lot more neutral curators and authorities to make sure make sure that it's going good at least.
Yeah, and we have Anshul also adding in the chat that neutral groundsmen may or may not be familiar with the conditions in another country. The lack of knowledge of local conditions could result in probably a dangerous wicket being prepared. Neeraj, again, do you have some thoughts on this? Because it is one side of looking at the argument, but then that's where I think you'll need a body like ICC to step in, prepare those neutral curators to conditions all around. Like you need a proper training program. So your thoughts on that?
I feel like the ICC have a lot more money than they do in the past, at least. At least I'd like to believe that. So maybe they can implement a program to make sure there's a lot more consistency. Because if you look at it very closely, conditions in the sea now, South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia, then naturally cold countries, so England, especially during the English winters, and somewhere around they get nasty cold. Even in English summer, there's a probability of rain as well. Coming to South Africa, they play their test during the December months. That is their summer. Even then, it's a little bit, sweltering hot, kind of like almost like India, but not necessarily like India, especially. It's a bit more hot, and then coming to New Zealand's a cold country, just like England. So you see, there's a consistency in at least the SENA nations, and even in the subcontinent, there's a lot more consistency nowadays as well. India's also making a Bunsen burner. Pakistan's also making a Bunsen burner. With the way, yeah, all. I mean, I remember, I think it was Multan. So they played on the same wicket essentially, and that kind of gifted Pakistan a win. So in coming into Molten, and Pakistan is also making Bunsen burner. Sri Lanka has been receiving flack for making Bunsen burners for a while now, and Bangladesh obviously has been making Bunsen burners for a very long time now. So you have all these subcontinent teams making the similar kind of wickets. So there's a sense of consistency across these nations and these cliques. So you see that you know there can be an effort made to at least educate the groundsmen about what the conditions are like. It's not impossible. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a while, but it can be done. Is what I like to believe in.
Yeah, that is true. And let's see, how this kind of pans out. But again, let's get back to the Travis Head topic because there's one more aspect I want to bring, this whole duel he was having with Mohammad Siraj. I think a lot of, media, like people were just lapping it up. They're like, oh, Kalesh ho raha hai, to, let's just jump on the bandwagon and everything. You could see a great cricketing battle, Siraj challenging Travis Head making a mockery of him, literally. But then there's
Right.
this whole episode of the send off and a lot of, like unpleasant things that was exchanged between them. So again, Neeraj, where do you draw the line between, playing fair and square and then, just crossing that line? It's just very unnecessary, right? What happened?
I feel like it was just an incident, honestly. I mean, I don't understand why there was a lot of fight over it, because in psychology, at least, there's this concept of, being focused essentially. So, when the players naturally have a tendency to switch on and switch off. I mean, after the match, you saw Head and Siraj having a more, handshake and a hug. So they know it's a game. We understand that it's a game. A lot of fans unfortunately don't, and a lot of ex-players also don't unfortunately understand that. So they kind of take it to their hearts as well in a way. So you know, for me, I feel like it was an incident. Both of them were heated up. It's not like Asad Siraj could look at the scorecard that was floating below him and see, oh my God, he scored 140. Oh my God, Australia's like 300 plus lead they have. So therefore, I should not celebrate. You can't do that, right? So he was elated and excited that he got the wicket. And Siraj is Siraj. I mean, he is naturally that emotional, passionate man. I mean, I remember, I think it was before the Gabba test when the national anthem played, he was in tears. That's the kind of passionate man he is for India. So you can't necessarily police a man that of that nature. I mean, maybe you could have told him that it's probably not the brightest of ideas to celebrate when you got bashed for 140 of you could have probably told him that, but it's not necessarily that you have to sit and police the man for doing what he usually does. So it's an incident, honestly. So that's where I draw the line at.
Yeah, and I think this whole discourse of, playing in the sports person or sportsman spirit and all of that, yeah, probably let's not get into that. It's very unnecessary. But again, just looking at India's bowling effort, it was a very tough outing, right? I mean, Australia was just making merry. Bumrah did, primarily most of the heavy lifting. Harshit looked all over the place. I think even Ujjwal in one of his comments adds that, Harshit has been flat. Somebody needs to fill in. Ash didn't do much. Then we had even Nitish Kumar Reddy, chipping in with that wicket. All in all, what did you make of that Indian bowling attack? Did they look very tired? Did they just give up? Or Travis Head was just doing Travis Head things? And yeah, there wasn't much to do, honestly.
I feel like the field setting has a role to play here as well, because when you look at the field setting that was for Perth and the field setting that was for Adelaide, it felt like two different teams altogether, and that kind of played into this as well, because and coincidentally it's also the shift of captains as well. Bumrah, the bowling captain himself, the bowling captain knows this is where you place it, this is where you don't place it, and he has a plan in mind. He wants to execute that plan. He knows what the bowlers also have in mind, so he wants to execute the bowlers' plan as well. And coming to the Adelaide, Rohit Sharma becoming the captain, you knew that, and even before this, even in the India New Zealand series, you see his field placement was very wide. There was too much spaces here and there for the batters to play along, and that kind of helped them as well. Helped Australia certainly. So Australia had a lot more breathing room in that sense. In Perth, if you notice very closely, the fields were very much close to each other, and that can get a bowler's confidence. There will be someone to catch the ball. There will be someone to appeal for you. There was this confidence that was there, but the confidence goes right out the window when you have a captain who's placing his fielders. By the time the spell was done, he places his fielder somewhere in the middle of nowhere, essentially. So the field placements played a role into where India was bowling, and Bumrah being Bumrah, he did well. Unfortunately, Harshit, he has been flat. He had a really good outing in Perth, but then the Perth wicket was also a lot more moving, so therefore he had a natural advantage to play with. But coming to Adelaide, he has been misfiring a little bit, so he has been flat. NKR, Nitish Kumar Reddy, the man he is, he's been trying to be the fourth seamer of this team, kind of like an enforcer role, trying to make sure there's not too many runs going here and there. But unfortunately, that plan also backfired a little bit, because the bowlers essentially they gave too much width, you know. So that's that. So moving along, I feel like they can try and keep Hashid aside for a little while. Maybe give him a little bit of a breathing room. Introduce him for a Sydney test, perhaps. New Year's test, New Year, me kind of situation. So maybe so giving that an option. So that's that. Coming to Siraj, I feel like at least he's had a semi decent outing, I'd say. In the innings that you mentioned, Travis Head versus Siraj, he picked 4 wickets. I mean, the wickets are all throwaway wickets by that point, but they were still decent wickets, speaking. Yeah, so he did well. So it's not like as if the bowlers are clueless. It's just that the bowlers are being hampered by the field placements and also by the fact that they just cannot seemingly hold their lines proper. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely one of those very forgettable bowling performances that no Indian fan would ever want to revisit and hope doesn't repeat at the Gaba. Uh, Anshul goes on to say, great that you mentioned the defensive fields set by Rohit. Something I think even the commentators were repeatedly telling, where are the slips? What is this very confusing field placements? So, do you reckon there's a sense of ignorance in his captaincy, Neeraj? I think a lot of Indian fans will again be upset with what we say, but then I think it's still a fair
Right.
shout. We should definitely
Hmm.
discuss more about Rohit's captaincy that has come under fire, right?
Hmm. Rohit's captaincy was built on his white ball legacy. If you notice very closely, yeah, see, he was captain of Mumbai Indians. Mumbai Indians as a team is a white ball team. In the white ball team, they had absolute legends play for them. Those 5 trophies did not come out of nowhere. I mean, if you look at it historically, Malinga, Pollard, Bumrah, Hardik Pandya, Krunal Pandya, who am I missing? Trent Bolt. And who
Surya
else?
Kumar
Quentin de
Yadav,
Kock.
yeah.
Yeah, Surya Kumar, yeah, they were all T20 stalwarts. And when you have a
Yes.
team like that, they're obviously going to win five trophies. And it was a unlucky spat that lost in 21. They had a chance to do a hat trick. They unfortunately didn't make it a hat trick because they had a torrid season after the India leg got cancelled and went into UAE. So you see a player, yeah, even Mitchell Johnson. So you have all these stalwarts playing in one team. And when you shifted to red ball is a different game altogether because you're playing for 5 days, 90 overs and beyond. You need to keep a hand on the pulse of the game. And when you keep a white ball, captain who's built his legacy on white ball, coming to red ball, his strategy for white ball does not necessarily work. And even Anshul pointed out this in the comments because because no way the senior leaders they're not. I feel like the test at Perth, Bumrah is a relatively inexperienced captain speaking. But coming to Perth, there were people who were captains around him who were giving him inputs. I mean, one of the I feel like the key player who gave him some input at least was Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli, the captain. And I remember this was in an episode of a podcast episode. I forgot. Are we being sponsored by the way? Are we being copyrighted by any chance? Not really. Okay, fine. So it was 22 Yarns by Gaurav Kapoor. So it was an episode by Joy Bhattacharya. So he mentions this very cleanly. Virat Kohli is like a hunter. And, you notice that even in his test captaincy, I remember India versus England 2021, before they go out onto the field, he says that legendary line, need to give them 60 overs of hell. I think that kind of set, you know, the precedent for that Indian team. And then when you have someone like Rohit Sharma, who's a very, and this is coming from sports psychology, by the way, there's three types of captains, a dictator captain, a very free captain, and less is fair captain. Rohit is very less is fair captain, where he lets the team decide and, has a democratic approach, which is helpful. It is helpful in certain situations, but in this situation, there has to be a captain who's authoritative, who has to tell the bowlers, I want this, I want that, I wanted to bowl here, I wanted to bowl there. And when Rohit has not been able to keep up with that, and even though India is awfully good at home, that got exposed very recently by New Zealand of all people. So that's that. I feel like Rohit has to stop for a second and take an inputs from his compatriots as well, because a very good white ball captain is having his legacy tarnished by his red ball offense. So yeah.
And I hope I'm really not jumping the gun here, Neeraj. But again, just looking at the way things are playing out, Indian fans are getting extremely restless. Do you somewhere think that, irrespective of the outcome we see in BGT, this might be the end of the road for Rohit Sharma? They want to look at, say, someone like a Bumrah as a full-time Test captain, or do you think they would still want to persist with Rohit till that England series and maybe still kind of think through the whole succession plan?
I feel like they'll hold on to Rohit Sharma for a while. India has a legacy of holding on to captains for a long time, unless they do something personally. One example that comes to my mind is Saurav Ganguly. He took captaincy in the 2000s, held it till 2007-8, and then retired at home. That's 7 whole years, and in between there was the whole Gret Chapel spat. But still, you know that the man was captain for almost 7 whole years. And then when he came to MS Dhoni was Indian Test captain from 2008 till 2014. That's 6 years. And then coming to Virat Kohli was captain from 2014 to 2022. So that's like solid 7-8 years there. So India has a tendency to hold on to captains for a long time. Unfortunately, I feel like that might change with Rohit. If things fall to a whitewash or a really bad result, maybe they'll consider keeping him as just the limited overs captain. But as a whole, I feel like he will be holding on for a while. And again, limited overs, I don't know if he'll survive as well because he's given up on T20s. He's become an ODI. He's the current ODI captain, if I'm not mistaken. Coming to Bumrah, I feel like he has to be the captain because bowling captains, as shown by Pat Cummins, they always have a tendency to think the game a little bit differently because when you're bowling, you know where the fields have to be. You have an understanding of the bowlers, and in the Virat Kohli era, bowlers won the matches for him. After I think from 2011 till 2014, Indian pacers in overseas tests have been an afterthought. If you notice very closely, so in that period, you know, Alistair Cook made a 290 something in England, and then you had Michael Clark making a 320 against India in Sydney, and then you had Brendan McCullum scores 300. So they were all situations where Indian captains were unable to utilize pace bowlers. When it came to Virat Kohli, he knew how to utilize those pace bowlers, and that was one of the beautiful things about his captaincy. He knew how to fire up the bowlers and how to utilize them according to the situation at hand. So if things don't go right, I feel like Bumrah will be forced to take up captaincy for now. But yeah, as I see it, if there's two ways this thing can go. One way is the long-term situation way, where Rohit Sharma is still held on to, or the we need to start fresh way, where Bumrah gets an opportunity.
Yeah, interesting times. I think even as an Indian fan, we will really have to see how things pan out before something reactionary happens, doesn't happen. But I hope there's a succession plan that the management is kind of thinking about. But again, just coming back to this match, let's just put India's second innings into context. It was a torrid affair. I mean, getting skittled for 175 with just Nitish Kumar Reddy, your 21-year-old, saving India the blushes with that knock of 42. Just what happened with that Indian batting lineup? You could see the batters commit the same mistakes, and I mean, as an Aussie fan, you must have been
Mhm.
really happy, Neeraj. But just looking at it, from a I
Right.
think neutral onlookers perspective, what was happening there?
Okay, so I feel like what happened for India was something of a lapse. They went into this innings expecting to outbat Australia. By the time Australians had figured out where India's weakness was, which was the invisible fifth stump, sixth stump line, and where they kept giving the edges over and over to slip fielders, and Australia smartly enough had slip fielders this time out. So the edges didn't just keep flying over to fours. So therefore, the Indian batters did not have breathing room. And Cummins being Cummins, he kept peppering Indians with short balls over and over and over. So that kind of worked as well. So the only person who could like find a way out of this was Nitish Kumar Reddy. But then NKR, as I'd like to call him, he's a very T20 oriented batter. We've seen his time with Sunrisers. He's been a very kept foot on the pedal kind of man, like a man who just ate a bunch of Guntur Karam. So that's how he is. He bats like he ate a whole bag of chilies. So in that sense, he kept batting over fast. So I am happy that NKR is getting a run, but unfortunately, it's a sign of deteriorating the rehabilitation for India, because if you see very closely, I mean, discounting the young guns like Jaiswal and NKR, the older batters have been struggling a lot. Virat Kohli is Virat Kohli. We cannot say anything about him, but he's been having a few issues here and there with a moving ball. And then Yes, so the same fifth stump, seventh stump line issue has been hitting Kohli. Rohit got out, same fashion, and so you see this team that's suffering because of a moving ball. So I don't feel like they should continue with this batting order. Maybe they could push Pant down a notch or two, because Pant is playing in as a Gilchrist kind of role. He should come in at a number five or a number six, because he should be facing an older ball rather than facing a new ball. I mean, I know he can reverse it Poland off for a four, but that doesn't necessarily mean the band can bat long, long, long. That's not what he's geared for. He's like a batter who keeps the scoreboard going, rather than a batter who keeps the line and helps everyone else score around him. So maybe they should look into shifting Pant a little bit lower. But in overall, it was a performance to forget for India. Maybe they could have done a little bit better. They could have done a few things differently here and there. Coming back to the comment that Pujara made, Indian batters keep playing too many shots over and over. So maybe they should try to limit their shots, try to hold the line. Their specialty, at least the older Indian batters, their specialty is to outbat the opposition. They should probably try to outbat Australia moving into Gabba, or if they want to keep this intent, at least make changes that would appropriate this intent. So yeah.
No, fair points there, Neeraj. And again, I also want to quickly get your thoughts on. I think a lot of fans and commentators, even experts for that matter, have been talking about this whole influx of T20 style batting into the Test side of things. As they like to call it, baseball, that has been, kind of corrupting Test cricket, so to say. And, probably the new generation will just never know, the art of batting that long innings, playing out a whole session and just, making your wicket count. So, again, are you a believer in this proponent ki, haan, matlab, Test cricket is probably on the decline? We see this whole T20 influx so much that Test cricket has just lost its essence. Or again, are we jumping the gun?
I feel like we're jumping the gun a little bit because Test cricket's T20's influence on Test cricket. I feel like has been pretty phenomenal because as much as I hate baseball being invented by England of all people, it is a good proponent in the sense that teams are not dawdling around. They're not wasting overs just for the sake of it. I think a comment was also made about over eight penalties. So you see that influx of T20 cricket, it is positive. It urges the team to bat with intent. But there was this one proverb from my mother tongue, which goes a bit like, "If you cross the limit, even nectar becomes poison." And I feel like a lot of teams should learn that because um, T20 style of batting, this intent oriented batting, can only save you so much. If you keep batting, skying every third ball or so, it will not help you because teams will understand that you're batting long, long. You're not batting long, long. You're here for the quick hits. They will obviously gear this fielding to that. So you'll have to, and this is a bit cliche, but I feel like grinding it out sometimes helps. It depends on the situation because if the situation demands you to grind it out, you're like three down, you should probably grind it out a little bit. Let the team build around you. But if the team is like say 300 for something, maybe then you can free it out a little bit. Maybe then you can hit a ball or two. Maybe then you need someone like an NKR who can hit a 40 or 40 something balls, but otherwise, you need someone who can play a 40 of 100 balls. So that's my take on this.
And again, here, Neeraj, do you think India is really missing, say the likes of Ajinkya Rahane or Cheteshwar Pujaras, who knew the art of playing that sort of a long innings, could have added value to this Indian lineup? Or do you think it would again be India taking two steps back and not giving their newer players an opportunity to step up?
I feel like India's Ranji pool has a lot more talent to show rather than going back to older players. I feel like they had to give up on this dependency on Cheteshwar Pujara and Ajinkya Rahane because you can't rely on older players to keep carrying you every single time you mess up. And that is a lesson that India has partially learned. I hope they learn it again and make the necessary calls. But I feel like they missed that archetype of players because if you notice very closely, every Indian team historically has always had a hold the line player. In the 2000s you had Dravid, in the 2010s you had Pujara. In the 2020s, who is it? You don't really see any player who's making an active effort to stand the ground and play, and it's only the seniors who ever do that. Holding the ground and playing and letting the team play around them. So I feel like this is a good bright opportunity for the Indian cricket team to stop and probably groom a player to play for that Rahul Dravid and Cheteshwar Pujara role. Of a player who has to hold the line, who has to keep batting, outbat the opposition essentially, because that is what they're good at. I remember Adelaide 2018. Melbourne were in the past two BGT series. You know, I remember Josh Hazel would basically losing his cool over Pujara because that man just kept batting. He just bats, 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 bats. That's the kind of player Pujara is. That's the kind of player that India are missing right now. They need a player who can just outbat the opposition. And I remember in the Sydney Test of 2018, Pujara made a double hundred. Rishabh Pant made a quick hundred next to him. So you see that the fire and ice kind of play here, and the literature student coming out of me. But you see that the fire and ice that is needed for India. India have the fire, but do they have the ice? That's waiting to be seen.
Yeah, and that's why I was hoping, say the likes of Dhruv Jurel being groomed for that sort of a role. We did see glimpses of that,
True, true,
in
true.
that A tour as well. So I'm just hoping that, something happens, some positive comes out from this tour, even if it's, like a proper mirror that gives us, some answers. Again, Australia's bowling, right? Again, in this second innings, the likes of Stark, Boland, Cummins, all of them, just coming good and dismantling that Indian batting lineup. So, what did you make of that bowling performance? Again, did you see it coming? Because before the match, also there's again so much chatter, about the Indians not being able to play the pink ball properly. The twilight session being so difficult to bat, and everything that was happening. Expected bowling effort from the Aussies.
I think it was predicted, because you knew that in the second innings itself. Wait, one second. One, two, three, four. I am making a mess here a little bit, but you know that coming into the first innings, at least in the night sessions, you knew that Australia had a plan and a game to play with. And they also knew how India would bat in the third innings as well. A lot of the batters, not a lot, a lot of the batters, they have not been facing a pink ball. Some of the batters is their first time facing pink ball in overseas conditions, like Jaiswal, for example. So you knew that, a lot of things would go wrong for the Indians, and it did go wrong. I mean, if you discount that NKR innings of 42, there's not a lot for the Indian team to show. So it's a concerning side for India, but a very good side for Australia because they had a plan and they executed well. And it's something that the Australians can look back and say, good job on. So, yeah.
That is true, and I think Ujjwal also goes on to echo a similar sentiment. I'm worried whether Scott Boland will release a horror movie at MCG starring the Indian batters.
Boland's
Uh,
got six at the G.
yeah,
Yeah,
hopeful.
I was just playing around,
Hoping,
guys.
yeah, hoping that doesn't happen. But even if it does, I think I don't know, man. I
Right,
really
right.
don't know what to hope for there. I
Mm,
actually also want to take this
but yeah.
point. Yeah, go on, go on.
You had something to say? No worries. Coming to Scott Boland, I feel like it's been a rejuvenation for him because I think it was before the Ashes series of 21. He was a very white ball bowler. I remember his days in Hobart Hurricanes of all teams. In the BBL. That's when I remember him actually bowling. There was a standalone phone game for BBL where you could play the BBL teams, and I remember seeing Poland. That's when I knew what this man was all about. But seeing him in the Ashes, and I remember that MCG innings, six at the G, if you will. So he's morphed himself into a Peter Siddle kind of role because if you notice, in the past at least, Peter Siddle played his role in from 2018 till like 2019-20. He was there as um, the long stay bowler, kind of like the enforcer role. So having an Scott Boland in this side who could move the ball inward to the right-hander batters, yeah, it is a possibility. We've seen the trailer. Picture abhi baki hai dost. Hopefully,
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
And that there goes all our Indian fans who are streaming in to this one, but it's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're all game, to watch a good performance by Scott Boland. I mean, he's one of those bowlers, gives you the absolute chills, but is definitely an impact player. And Ujjwal also goes on to say we are enjoying the BGT, and I think through the course of the discussion we have been speaking about it. But South Africa got the ticket to Lords first. So Neeraj, have you been following up with the other series that have been the other series that's happening? That is, say, South Africa versus Sri Lanka, and how South Africa is actually doing well, no?
South Africa has a chance to do the funniest thing here and possibly virtually knock out India from this series. There's this whole chain. New Zealand lost to Sri Lanka, and then New Zealand eventually won against India, and then India beat Sri Lanka somewhere along the line. And then as you see this whole chain of events that's going on, right? So I feel like South Africa are doing a lot of things right. Their batting is finally starting to click. They're glue in their batting order. Bauma, 4 innings in South against Sri Lanka, 70, 115, 78, 66. those are very good scores they can be proud of. And it's been a torrid few months for Bavuma as well because, um, right. So, Bauma, remember someone who, right. Let's see. But coming back to South Africa with Sri Lanka flying over, I feel like Bauma has been a torrid few months. He was very much in the public limelight, especially for Indian fans of all people. Seeing that he was a sabotager for South Africa's miraculous loss against Australia, and then again being dropped from the T20 side, not having any takers against Say 20. So the see that has been a very tough few months for him, and I'm happy that he's finally getting to have a good spell, especially in Test because that's where he's been excellent at. So let's see. And say batting lineup has been doing well lately. 10 centuries and 9 tests. It's been a very comfortable few months at least for South Africa in the test format. I feel like the bowling attack, especially the likes of Rabada, Janssen, Andre Nokia, and the case of Maharaj, they've been doing well lately. So I feel like if things go right, we may be seeing an Australia versus South Africa final. So I'm happy that South Africa is doing well. Coming to Sri Lanka, I feel like there's this one funny article on ESPN, by the way, by one of my favorite writers, at least, Andrew Fidel Fernando. So it was, looking at Sri Lanka's performances in the T20 World Cup, and the title literally goes, "This could have been an email." So that's how the story has been for Sri Lanka lately. I mean, I understand that they beat New Zealand and they also beat India in a white ball series very recently. But there's a lot of things going wrong in Sri Lankan cricket. There's a lot of things going right in Sri Lankan cricket. This is the acid test, if you will, for Sanath Jayasurya's regime. Hopefully, things go right because this is, I think, probably one of the first few spells where you haven't seen a Sri Lankan captain get dropped out of nowhere. Historically speaking, they've always been they're playing this musical chairs with captains. So I'm happy that they're finally having some stability in their lives. Hopefully, I hope to see Sri Lanka also doing well. We are playing them right after Border Gavaskar. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, and I mean, on the one end of the spectrum, we have South Africa and Sri Lanka playing. We also have England and New Zealand, which is turning out to be quite an interesting series in itself. Ujjwal also goes on to say now it's becoming as if we breathe, and Joe Root has another Test 100, coming very close to that Sachin Tendulkar record of everything that he's achieved in Test cricket. So yeah, thoughts on this, Neeraj?
I'm pretty sure Sachin's sitting somewhere in the corner of the world and wondering, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. That's how he's probably going. But yeah, it's an interesting series, honestly, because on one hand, you have England who lost 4-1 to India, and on the other hand, you have New Zealand who beat India 3-0 at home, no less. So you have these two nice people who have had very different experiences with India coming together and playing a test in New Zealand. And this is also where, if I'm not mistaken, Stokes got fined a overrate penalty, if I'm not mistaken. So this overrate penalty discussion, and I agree with Ujjwal here. I feel like it should probably be checked in drawn test because if you're winning a test, you want a test. I don't think you have to sit there and start saying that you missed these many overs, this many over things. So I honestly agree with Ujjwal in this case. And also Harry Brook, he's been having a phenomenal season. He's been scoring bucket loads of runs in New Zealand. I think his average is 96 now in New Zealand of all places. Because that's where his fast-paced batting style. And he's a very risky kind of player. He keeps moving his wrists a lot. And I think that resting kind of has helped him in New Zealand because he can pick up the pace very quickly. Because I remember seeing his batting stint in PSL and during the series against Pakistan. The way he just clicks off of the pace, it's phenomenal. And now you have a new generation of batters. Brooke, Jaiswal, Rachin, Constance, Stubbs, Kabinju. They're all very different archetypes of players because I feel like Rachin, Stubbs, Kabinju, they're all very middle order batters. So the ones who can bat at 4 or 5, grind it out, or go big. And then on the other spectrum, you have Jaiswal, Brook, Constance, who are very, opener oriented batters who face a new ball kind of players. Brook is not necessarily an opener. He plays in the 3 and 4 position. But, if the England openers have a moment of 2021 again, if they ever have that session. So let's see. And maybe time for Brook to use his money that he earned from the IPL and invest it into somewhere in Pakistan. Land's cheap, I heard that from a friend of mine over there. Well, let's see. Let's see. I hope Brook is continuing his form. Let's see. I have huge hopes for Brook, and the English team has been doing well. Gus Atkinson took a hat trick recently there as well. So England have a plan. New Zealand are still stuck in a bit of a hangover. Hopefully they wake up and do something about it. But you remember that one meme on the internet that goes, "I hope both teams lose." That's my internal voice, but I'm not saying it out loud. You didn't hear it from me. But yeah, I hope there's a good result for either team. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, again, just coming back to this, series, the Border Gavaskar Trophy. I mean, Australia has one team you just, probably write off that you're on peril because they always, have this tendency to make strong comebacks. This is a five-match test series, which has so much to offer, right? So again, Neeraj, what are your expectations as the series kind of, plays out? Do you see a scenario where it, goes to all and then, there's a fight for the fifth test? Or do you think, India's probably registered their only win and yeah, we're pretty much done and dusted. Like, what do you expect?
I feel like there's a frightening parallel to 2011 and 2014 in this series. I mean, they didn't get whitewashed. They obviously have a win in their bag right now. But I feel like there's two ways things can go. One is the 4-1 way, where this Australia managed to figure out what India's up to. India keep playing defensively. They keep holding on to their own stalwarts and lose miserably, or it can go the other way where it comes to a head at Sydney and a draw ensues. So let's see. In a way, I feel like it's a situation that's very tricky for both teams as well. It's a trap in a way. It's Australia is also looking to prepare traps for the wickets, if you will, if things don't go right at Gabba. So let's see. Let's see. I feel like it's a fine opportunity for both teams to sit and reflect. Australia had a chance to, assess where they take their team from here. India had a chance to sit back and assess where their team stands right now. So let's see. I'm confident that Australia can do things, but I'm not going to sit and count my coins just yet.
Yeah, and I hope we're in for a very interesting series, not entirely lopsided or like, like one sided in that sense. But again, now just looking at the next test, I mean, are there any changes you're expecting for both the sides? Because India might be tempted to, kind of spice up that pace battery and, have some influx of new players. Australia on the other end, I don't know if Josh Hazelwood would be available to play. So, any changes you're expecting for both sides?
I feel like they carry the same size across. So, I feel like Australia, maybe if Hazelwood gets fit in this week or two, maybe they'll try to show on him for Melbourne, not necessarily for Gabba. But as it stands, I feel like they're confident with their batting lineup. McSweeney, uh, this is a personal one. I feel like McSweeney should play till at least Sydney so that we could make the joke of Sydney McSweeney. you know, yeah, Sydney McSweeney, the actress. But yeah, Australia, I don't see a lot of changes. India, maybe a change or two. In the bowling lineup, especially, I feel like Ashwin needs to step back a little bit and let his state compatriot and Sundar take on. So I'm happy with how the team is right off Australia. For India, maybe a change or two. So yeah, that's my take.
Fair enough. And yeah, Neeraj, I think we've almost reached the end of our discussion. So, do you have any last and final thoughts before we wrap up?
Okay, my final thought is that maybe this is the 10-year anniversary of the BGT happening. Yeah, it's the 10-year anniversary of the BGT 2014. So that was a series of reflections for India. That was a series where we saw Kohli the captain. Maybe this is the series where we see Bumrah the captain. Let's see. But honestly speaking, I feel like. this is a very poised test series. It was very hyped. I think the hype was there since the end of the World Cup last year. So there was a lot of hype about coming to Australia, beating Australia 5-0. It's not going to be final. I think we're pretty sure about that right now. But let's see. I feel like it's a result that can go either ways. Both teams have been doing well. They've tried to execute their plans. One of them's been nailing it. The other one's trying to nail the plan, but hasn't gone to plan. Or if the plan exists at all, it's been very mixed lately. So I feel like it's a very good contest, and we are in for a barnstorming show. Oh wait,
Yeah.
Washington's at Brisbane. Maybe
This
memories of
is
2020.
yeah, this
Yeah,
is
memories of
slightly
2020,
older.
21.
Yeah, this is a slightly older
Yeah,
comment, but definitely had to take it from Anshul. And even yeah, just this
right,
one, but the drop in wickets of Optus being prepared at the back of the Waka, but with the rain
right.
easy sailing days. Yeah, the wicket preparation
Hmm.
didn't happen the traditional way, unfortunately. Thank you for that insight, Anshul. I wasn't really sure about this one.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. But yeah, coming to Wash at the Gabba, he named his dog Gabba, didn't he? I
He did,
remember,
yeah.
yeah, I remember that 21 test very vividly. I was coming back from Pongal back home. So I was in my home, and I remember launching the last ball, and I got so frustrated, right? Took the TV remote and I smashed it. And it's a very unfortunate memory. I remember
No
getting
way.
a few yellings here and there. Yeah, I was literally angry because I was like, that was the culmination of all the, the clownery that I had seen from Australia. So that was the peak of the clownery I saw from Australia. And I know after that, the IPL happened. And since I'm a Rajasthan Royals fan, that start of that year's IPL was not very nice to us. So I have also outlined this kind of in my Medium article as well. You'll see it on NOTV's stories, perhaps. Let's see. So, there was a very dark few months for me as a sports fan. This month,
Oh.
right now, I feel like I'm having a good time. The Royals in auction has, been interesting to say the least. Maybe in a future episode, let's see when we can. Australia have been doing things right, and I hope Gabba's test match that I can look forward to this time. So yeah, that's my comments.
Yeah, definitely, Neeraj. We have a lot to look forward to, and I hope we get to see a evenly contested match. I mean, I can't say let's hope for Australia to win, but anyways, may the best team
Right.
win. I'm trying to be as
Yeah.
neutral as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, folks,
Right
that
on.
pretty much does conclude our discussion. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing all of your lovely insights, Neeraj, and to all of our viewers. You guys were amazing. It really helped our discussion. If you're new here, please do subscribe to Never in the Back Foot. We're almost close to 500. Not that numbers mean anything, but then like 500 feels nice, has a nice ring to it. And I will also link Neeraj's Medium page and his lovely stories on Never in the Back Foot Stories, so you can check that out. He's a budding writer. Actually, not budding. He's a writer only. You read his work, folks. And yeah,
Right.
thank you guys for tuning in. That's all for now from us. Take care. Good night.
Right.